What if death wasn't the end, but only the beginning of the mystery? Two people, 2 decades apart, two cold cases that have puzzled investigators, haunted families, and left behind more questions than answers. In small-town Indiana, a man named Clarence Roberts supposedly perished in a fiery car explosion, but years later, someone who looked exactly like him was spotted alive, a coffin buried, but was it truly his body inside? Meanwhile, up in British Columbia, Canada, a woman named Cindy James was found dead under bizarre and terrifying circumstances. Before her death, she reported being stalked, attacked, and harassed for years, but no one ever caught the culprit. Her death was ruled as not a murder, but what else could it have been? Two chilling stories: faked death or fatal obsession, murder, or something far more twisted. In today's video, we dive deep into the cold, confusing and captivating cases of Clarence Roberts and Cindy James. Grab your coffee, turn down the lights and get ready, because these aren't just cold cases, they're icy puzzles begging to be solved. Let's begin.
History of Clarence Roberts, the man who seemed to die twice. 52-year-old Clarence Roberts and his brother Carson owned a hardware shop in Nashville, Indiana. Clarence was a hard worker and was regarded as a pillar of the community. Clarence and his wife, Geneva, had married in 1941. She had come from humble beginnings and stood by him whilst he built his business, raising 4 children and moving into progressively nicer surroundings, eventually even acquiring 3 luxury cars and a large house. However, the profit from Clarence's hardware store was insufficient to finance this upper-class lifestyle, and the Robertses were in heavy debt. Covered the large expenses, Clarence sold his hardware shop and rolled over the capital into several grain elevators and an apartment complex. Misfortune sunk these real estates, however, and Clarence hit his low point financially when Sheriff Warren Roberts, his own brother, was ordered to repossess 2 of Clarence's luxury cars. The repossession occurred and the Robertses were left desolate and desperate. 1 month later on, November the 18th, 1970, a fire destroyed the shack on the Roberts family's property. 1 body was discovered, burned beyond recognition, but it was later identified as Clarence Roberts. On the 29th of November 1980, 10 years later, nearly to the day, another fire destroyed the Roberts' residence. 2 bodies were discovered inside. One was identified as Geneva Roberts, and the other was identified as Clarence Roberts. The same man died twice. So here are some of the case theories and suspects. It was recorded that 2 days before the first fire, Clarence was sighted in a tavern in Morgantown, another town in Brown County, where he bought dinner for a hobo and offered him work doing odd jobs around his house. The vagrant collapsed unexpectedly and complained of an ailment, and Clarence volunteered to take him to a doctor. However, a police search later showed that the incidents didn't seem to happen, as a search of the clinics and the hospitals in Brown County, all adjacent counties, turned up no record of a vagrant that was admitted for any kind of treatment. A shotgun was also discovered in the ashes of the first fire. Some believe Clarence, depressed from losing his cars and his money and his lifestyle, committed suicide and died in the first fire. Others, however, suspect that Clarence may have murdered the vagrant on the night before his death, watching while hiding in the woods. Although it was suspected that Clarence had shot himself with a shotgun, and the autopsy revealed that no shots were fired into the body, although blood evidence showed that the body found in 1970, the first fire, was most likely not Clarence's blood drawn from the corpse, as type AB was recorded, while Clarence was type B, in accordance to his medical reports found in the US Army service records. Another mismatched piece of evidence was the Masonic ring belonging to Clarence. It was actually found in the ashes, but oddly undamaged, yet the fire and the intensity of the fire would have caused significant damage. Adding to the speculation was that in 1970 was the same year that Clarence paid for multiple life insurance policies on himself, naming Geneva as the beneficiary. The inconsistent evidence from the first fire caused the insurance agencies to deny Geneva claiming Clarence's life insurance. The Roberts asked to have Clarence declared dead. However, the judge denied the request, citing insufficient evidence. Pathologists came to Geneva's side, believing that the body found in the shed in the first fire was Clarence. Geneva appealed and the courts upheld the denials, which was disheartening for her to say the least. Losing everything, Geneva moved to a more squalid house in a lower class area and took a job working in a kitchen of a local Howard Johnson's to make ends meet. Years later, neighbours reported seeing a strange man lurking around and near Geneva's house, who avoided contact with anyone. While it seems likely that Geneva had resumed dating after Clarence's death, the fact she denied contacting such a man or allowed anyone inside her house fueled speculation that the strange man was not her new boyfriend but was in fact Clarence, who had exhausted his savings and could no longer afford to be on the land, thus returning Geneva. Another factor was added to the gossip was that local shopkeepers said that Geneva often bought large quantities of beer from when she did her regular shops. As Geneva had diabetes, it was unlikely for her to be drinking this amount of alcohol, as it would make her severely ill, which did nothing but fuel beliefs that she was harbouring somebody in her house. The police set up surveillance at one point, and they monitored the house on a regular basis, photographing everything that came and went from the house. However, they did not locate the mystery man. Local reporter Helen Ayers became friendly with Geneva. She believed that Geneva was hiding something or someone. She had visited Geneva several times at her house. She recalled that Geneva would always meet her on the back porch and would never let her in her home. Helen also interviewed Clarence's sister, who lived near to the house. She said that she could hear Geneva talking with a man. However, she claimed the man's voice did not sound like Clarence. In 1980, nearly a decade to the day after the first fire, the second fire burned down Geneva's house. The discovery of two bodies, one Geneva's, suggests several possibilities. One theory is that Clarence returned, murdered both Geneva and the strange man in a jealous rage. Another theory is that Clarence was indeed the strange man, and that he and Geneva committed suicide together to allow their children to cash in their life insurances. Yet another theory is that the unknown third party killed Clarence and Geneva and set the fire. It was believed by investigators that the second fire was definitely arson and that an accelerant, probably turpentine, was placed from the bedroom to the back door. So did Clarence miraculously die twice? Or was one of them a mistake? Or was one of them an insurance job? Most likely the first one. And what do you think?
On June the 8th, 1989, a 44-year-old Canadian nurse named Cindy James was found dead in Richmond. She had been drugged and strangled with her hands and feet behind her back. She was found in the yard of an abandoned home, a mile and a half away from a small shopping mall where her car was also discovered parked up. She had been missing since May 25th. When her car was discovered in the parking lot, there was a lot of blood on the driver's side of the door, and the items from her wallet was found under and around the car. When her body was discovered at the abandoned house, it looked as though Cindy had been brutally murdered. A black nylon stocking was tied tightly around her neck, and the autopsy revealed that Cindy died from an overdose of morphine and other drugs. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, however, believed that her death to be an accident or suicide. The Vancouver coroner ruled that Cindy's death was not suicide, an accident or a murder, claiming that she had died of an unknown event. This was despite the fact that in the several years preceding her death, Cindy had reported nearly 100 incidents of harassment, beginning 4 months after she divorced her husband. To this day, her death remains a mystery, even after the public inquest, at which 84 witnesses were called to testify. Her father, Otto Hack, and his wife, Matilda, never believed that Cindy killed herself or that she would have been able to stage her own death. Her sister, Melanie Hack, who was 27 when Cindy died, ended up writing a book titled Who Killed My Sister, My Friend, and the medical and police reports to obtain enough information into her sister's unsolved death. This case has been a subject of many programs, many YouTube videos, many podcasts, and many of our armchair detectives, if you like, and even to this day it is still as puzzling. Back in 1989, forensic investigation was very much at its beginning. It was in its infancy, and the technology did not exist to solve the case. If her stories of attacks, kidnappings and harassments were true, then Cindy was massively failed, and as a result, she lost her life because of it. Cindy was the eldest of 6 children. At the age of 19, she had married Dr. Roy Makepeace, who was 18 years her senior. She worked as a nurse, but also loved to counsel children with emotional problems. She seemed happy, but when she decided to end her marriage in 1982 and move on with her life, all hell broke loose. When she decided to approach the police with the tales of her harassment and her torment at the time, the death threats that she was getting by phone and by mail, each incident was taking a bit more away from Cindy, or at least that's how it appeared. 3 dead cats were found hanging in her garden, her porch lights were smashed and her phone lines were cut on more than one occasion. Bizarre notes began to appear on her doorstep, and 5 violent physical attacks were reported. You got to remember that Cindy, on a few occasions, was allegedly physically attacked. One night, Cindy's good friend, Agnes Woodcock, dropped by, and when there was no answer when she knocked on the door, she went around the back of the house to find Cindy crouched down with a nylon stocking tied around her neck. She had gone to the garage to get something and was allegedly grabbed from behind by an unidentified intruder. Messages were left on the windshield of a car, along with a picture of a covered corpse. The harassment would stop and start again on a few occasions, leaving Cindy feeling more and more destabilised. She expressed her despair in her private journals. Cindy tried what she could to stop the alleged harassment. Cindy moved house, she painted her car, she changed her last name. Finally hired Ozzy Caban, a local private investigator. The police were investigating, but as time passed, they were starting to doubt her stories. Ozzy reported later that Cindy would be evasive at times and withhold information. However, her parents believed that this might have been because the truth could put her family in danger. Private investigator installed lights at her residence and gave her a 2-way radio and a panic button. The police would do surveillance on a regular basis. One night, Caban heard strange sounds coming through the radio and decided to go over to investigate. On arrival, he found Cindy on the floor, unconscious, with a knife through her hand, with a note attached to her hand by the knife. The note said, "You are a dead bitch." He checked her pulse and actually thought she was dead. She was hospitalised and only recalled that a needle was put into her arm. The police did not take fingerprints and were growing tired of the whole saga. But Caban was adamant that nobody could have done that to themselves. Cindy subjected herself to several hypnosis sessions and a polygraph test, but was considered too traumatised to be a good candidate. The threatening phone calls continued, could never be traced because they were too short. Mind you, there was never any calls when the police were doing 24-hour surveillance, so you cannot blame them for growing suspicious. The incidents always happened when there was nothing that could be done or no one was around. Her parents thought her attacker was smart enough to stay away at the proper times in order to make Cindy look more and more suspicious. In the present day, we could trace these calls and know exactly who it was, or get a very good idea of where we need to look in order to trace these calls. There was one occasion of Cindy being attacked, and she was found laying in a ditch 6 miles from her home, wearing a man's work boot and glove. She was suffering from hypothermia and had cuts and bruises all over her body. She was also found with a black nylon stocking around her neck, a trademark of her alleged attacker. She did not remember the event and asked her parents to stay with her. One evening, they were awakened by noises in the basement and saw flames. After realising the phone was dead, they went outside to alert the neighbours. They did report seeing a man, a strange looking man or a suspicious looking man, at the curb and asked him to call the fire department. Instead, he ran off. This was the second arson. The police determined that the fire was started from inside the house. Because they saw no fingerprints on the window, they thought the perpetrator would have used to gain entry into the house. Therefore, they determined that Cindy had staged the incident. They also found it quite odd that Cindy would walk her little dog late at night, when she apparently feared for attack or feared for her life. Why would she put herself in more harm? As it went on, her parents saw the deterioration in Cindy's mental state. Suicidal, her doctor committed her to the local psychiatric ward. 10 weeks later, she was released. That's when she admitted to friends and family that she knew more than she was saying about the perpetrator. Was she falling deeper into delusion? Or was there a real person doing all this to her? Cindy became very depressed because she felt that her credibility was destroyed, her reputation was in tatters, and she believed that somebody genuinely wanted her dead. She finally told police that she believed her tormentor was her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace. They encouraged her to phone him and confront him, and they taped the conversation. As a psychiatrist, Roy would have been familiar with the fine art of playing with her mind, but totally denied the involvement during the conversation. In fact, Makepeace gave the police a recording from his own answering machine that contained a death threat. To round it up, Cindy was either very confused, psychotic, or totally innocent. And it all ended when they found her body 2 weeks after she was reported missing. She had gone to the shopping mall to deposit a hospital paycheck and do some grocery shopping. After that, she was never seen again until her body was discovered in the abandoned house yard. The fact that she had an injection mark on her arm makes it hard to believe that she could have walked 1.5 miles to the spot where she'd been found and tied herself after injecting herself. They found no needle close to the car or around the crime scene. Police think she ingested the morphine and had plenty of time to do the rest. But they found no evidence to back this up, and no proof of purchase of black nylons, which was a trademark. It is worth noting that Cindy also had a lover named Pat McBride, who happened to be a cop. The police suspected him and Makepeace, but had no concrete evidence against either of them. The evidence in the case was quite contradictory, incomplete, and very baffling, so the police opted to blame Cindy. Her ex-husband came to believe that Cindy had multiple personalities, sometimes known as DID, and was unaware that she was tormenting herself. Basically, the idea is behind DID is a person might have 2 or more personalities, each taking the spotlight, if you like, of the physical body for different periods of time. So when one personality would be in charge, Cindy, her base personality if you like, would be completely unaware that she was not in charge and another personality was. So, did she do this to herself? Or is there a murderer out there that never got caught? The only undeniable truth in this story is that Cindy James suffered immensely in the saga, and she paid with her life. Her journals tell the heartbreaking story of a woman tortured mentally and physically, either by her own hand or because somebody was sadistic and predatory enough to target her. So either way, she was a victim. She was either a victim of herself or somebody that has not yet been found. So as the decades roll on, I guess this is one of those cases that will never be solved. As sad as it is, at least Cindy is now at peace.